afternoon, everyone. My name is Shaifali Aggarwal, and I am EVP of Business Development and Strategy and a Senior MBA Admissions Counselor and Strategist at Stratus Prep. And I got my MBA from Harvard Business School. So I'm really excited to be here today, and I wanted to thank our partners, Beat the GMAT, and I wanted to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen in this afternoon. And so with that, I'm going to delve into our topic for today, which is what you must do now to get admitted to a top business school in round one. All right, so in terms of our agenda, there are a few things that we are going to cover today. So first off, I will start with my introduction and go into a little bit more detail with respect to my background so you understand who I am. And then I will go a little bit into who Stratus Prep is. Then I'll touch upon who you are really competing against in the MBA admissions process. And then go into what business schools are looking for, the 10 steps that you can take now as you think about admission in round one. And I think it's fantastic that you have joined us today, because definitely the more time that you have on your side, the better that you will be prepared to work on your applications and to bolster your own profile. And then I'll go into some case studies, some key takeaways from our session today, and we also have an exclusive offer for you for taking the time to listen. So as I mentioned, my name is Shaifali, and I am a senior strategist at Stratus Prep. I received my undergraduate degree in economics from Princeton University, and I got my MBA from HBS. I've always been very passionate about helping people to attain their educational goals. And so when I was at HBS, I was the VP admissions of the Women's Student Association, which is really the largest female-focused organization on campus. And in that role, I worked directly with the admissions office as a bridge between current female students and prospective and admitted women. And this is really the closest you can get to the admissions office at HBS. So it was a really great experience for me. Professionally, I've actually spent most of my career on Wall Street in finance. I've worked both in investment banking, and I was also in the investment management industry as a consumer staples equity analyst. And so that really provided me a really fantastic quantitative background. But I always sort of had this entrepreneurial urge, and so before Stratus Prep, I started an online media company, which was a really great way to combine what I had learned in finance with the knowledge I had gained from business school. And then I finally joined Stratus Prep to pursue my passion for education and entrepreneurship. And as I mentioned, I've been doing this for a few years, and I've successfully worked with candidates to help them gain admission to HBS, Stanford, Wharton, MIT, Kellogg, and Columbia, to name a few. So who is Stratus Prep? We are the world's leading test prep and admissions consulting company, and we were founded in 2006 by an HBS grad. We were also named on the Inc. 5000 list in 2014 and 2015, which has been really exciting for us. And we were listed as the 19th fastest growing education company. So what's really, really rewarding is that every year we help hundreds of applicants gain admission to the top MBA programs, and many with merit-based scholarships. We've also been featured in many of the top media publications. So Inc., US News and World Report, Forbes, CNN Money, and Fortune. And I would really encourage you to do a quick search online for these articles. There's some really great content out there. For instance, we have articles on, are you prepared for the MBA application season? And how community involvement can help enhance your application. So do a search, and I think you'll find that there's a lot of incremental information that will really help you as you think about your application. And you'll also be on top of trends in terms of what's happening in the space and in terms of what admissions officers are looking for as they review applications. So this is one of my favorite slides, and it's really focusing on who your competition is. So a lot of people believe that you're competing against the entire pool. But the reality is that you're actually competing against smaller buckets. So think about it. Business schools want to create a diverse class of people. So what they'll do is they will actually look at candidates and assess them with respect to industry, gender, geography. So for instance, if you are a male working in finance on the West Coast or in San Francisco, then you will be evaluated against other males in finance on the West Coast. If you are a female working in social enterprise in India, then you will be competing against other females in social enterprise in that part of the world. So it's really important to think about how you can distinguish yourself from that bucket of people so that you can really stand out from the pool. So what are business schools really looking for? So there are a few things that business schools really want to assess when they are evaluating a candidate. So the first is vital stats. And this really encompasses your academic performance and what you've been doing professionally and personally. So I would really think about the vital stats in terms of those three buckets. So on the academic side, what does that mean? So first off, it's your undergraduate GPA. So how did you do in college? If you didn't do that well and you have a weaker GPA, schools want to understand if there's a compelling reason why you have a weaker GPA, or if there's been a rising trend over the years and your GPA has risen from freshman year to senior year, which is always a positive. There are actually things you can do now to make admissions committees more comfortable with the fact that you can handle the rigor of the curriculum. And I'll be going into that in more detail later on in the presentation. The other piece to think about is your GMAT or GRE score. And that's something that you can really focus on now. I would strongly recommend taking the exam if you haven't taken it yet. It's really tough to be working on your applications while studying at the same time. It can be done, but it definitely increases the stress factor. So if you can get that out of the way now, we'll definitely do that. So the second vital stat schools want to get a sense about is your professional experience. So what have you been doing professionally? What kind of roles have you been in? Have you been taking on additional levels of responsibility and progressing in your career? Have you been having impact in your role? So those are some of the things to think about. You can still have a lot of impact even if you don't have a more senior title. So it's really about what you can do at your level to really make the clients in your firm stand out, to make your organization do better. And those are the stories that you'll want to think about. And then finally, on the personal side, it's thinking about your community involvement. So remember, for all the top schools, it's not only about what you can bring to your organizations professionally, but it's also about what you can contribute to your community. Most, and I would say practically every top school, wants to admit people who will be giving back to society. So it's really important to be thinking about that piece as well. And then across both the work experience, community involvement, and even what you did in college, schools want to get a sense of what your leadership potential has been. So really think about what you've done from a leadership perspective across all these different areas. So that's the first piece. And the second piece that schools really want to get a sense about is your unique personal story. So who are you? What makes you different? And some of the questions to really think about are, what are your greatest accomplishments? What challenges have you faced? How have you grown from those setbacks or challenges? What diverse perspectives do you bring to the class? And it's about being authentic to yourself. So let me give you an example. I had a client last year who was in her lower 30s from India, and she was a serial entrepreneur. Now, what was really interesting about her was the fact that she faced a lot of resistance being a female entrepreneur in India and faced a lot of challenges. So her story really focused on how she overcame that and how she was resilient and how she was strong and was able to just sort of chug through all of that to be successful. She was admitted to Stanford in round 1 last year and is a first-year student there. So I get a lot of questions about people asking me, what has worked in the past? And that's the wrong question to ask, because what has worked for other people may not necessarily work for you and probably will not. So it's really important to be authentic to who you are. And then finally, why business school? So schools want to make sure that you've done your homework and that you are very specific with respect to how that program can help you. Sure, there may be some general reasons as to why you want to go to business school, but you want to make sure that you identify the specific reasons why each program is a good fit for you and why you're a good fit for the program. So, with respect to the timeline, the key is really to start early, which is why I'm excited that you're here today. Preparing now really gives you the time and the opportunity to authentically improve your profile. You can identify weaknesses and then make the appropriate changes to fill in those gaps so that once you apply, your application is as strong as it can be and you can put your best foot forward. So, we have 10 steps that you should take now for admission. So I'm going to dive right in. So the first step is to beat the GMAT. And as I mentioned before, that's really something that you want to get out of the way now. So the thing to keep in mind with the GMAT is that it's just a hurdle you have to overcome. Sure, scoring a 780 is really great, but it's not necessary. As long as you sort of fall within a good tight range of what the school is looking for and can hit that median, then you're pretty much checking the box. So you want to study efficiently and address your weaknesses. And we actually have a really great program at Stratus Prep where tutors work with you one-on-one to identify your weaknesses. And so our tutors all scored a 760 or above on the GMAT, which is the top 1%. And they have over 2 years of teaching experience. So really start to think about knocking that out right now. The second step to think about is what we call introspection and profile development. And we actually spend a lot of time in our process working with clients to really tease out what those accomplishments are. So you really have to think about who you are and what you bring. And I have to admit, I did a really deep introspection when I was applying to business school, and I probably haven't done as deep a dive since then. So it's a pretty intense process, but a pretty interesting process as well. And, as I mentioned before, you want to think about your leadership at work and in outside activities. And as you think about that leadership, also think about how you've been able to impact other people and other organizations in those roles. The other qualities that you want to think about when you dig in a little deeper with respect to your accomplishments is how did you go about solving problems, and especially complex problems. Schools want to see that you can think through problems both analytically and also from a qualitative perspective, and then from there come to the right solution. And how did you go about solving things? And they also want to see if you have a global perspective. What do you bring to your class globally? And that's what's actually really unique about business school. I think it's one of those few opportunities where in one setting you're with people who have worked in different industries all around the world and in different functions. So there's so much you can learn and that you can even bring to the table. And I'll be going through a little bit more detail what that really means to business school when you think about applying. The third step to think about is your track record of results. And the first place to really start to think about that is through your resume. So as you go through your resume, you want to make sure that you can demonstrate a track record of qualitative evidence and quantitative evidence of impact. And so on the quantitative side, are you able to measure the results that you've been able to have? If not, then can you qualitatively point to the impact that you had? So as soon as this is over the next few weeks, I would encourage you to go back to your resume and really think about where the gaps exist. Not only from a qualitative and a quantitative perspective, but even from a leadership perspective. So are you doing enough and showing enough on the professional side? Similarly, are you doing enough and showing enough on the community side? And if not, now is really the time to start to rectify that. Leadership. So I would say that this is the #1 quality that business schools really want to see from candidates. And they're going to assess that from your essays, from your resume, from recommendation letters, from the short answer questions. And so at work, leadership can be formal or informal. But you actually have a lot more control over the initiatives that you show at work and potentially the leadership that you can demonstrate. Are there gaps? Are there areas at work that you think can be improved? If so, take the initiative now to create those stories so that you can point to them and you can demonstrate the impact, and there's enough time for you to actually have that impact. Now, if you obviously start to think about this 2 weeks before the application is due, it's really, really difficult. So you actually have that time now to think about that. And then think about leadership in your community. Take on a leadership role in an organization that you really care about to demonstrate authenticity. Now, let me give you another example. I had a client just this past round 1 who I was working with who decided to join an organization that was focused on raising awareness about a disease that his girlfriend had. So as you can imagine, it was a very personal cause to him, and he could relate very closely to it. So that passion and that authenticity came through. And he was able to weave a thread in this story. So there are things like that that really, that you can think about that make you more authentic and that you're passionate about. Definitely do so. And so this client that I worked with in round 1 was eventually admitted to Wharton Booth in Columbia. So it's really important, as I mentioned before, to be authentic to who you are. We don't really do anything at Stratus Prep that would be considered to be cookie cutter because every person is so different and everyone has such unique experiences. So you want to take the time now to create those experiences that you can talk about in your essays and during interviews. The 5th step that you can think about now is international experience. So as I had talked about earlier on, business schools do put a really high value on international experience and people's global perspective. So your experience should really be focused on work experiences that you've had abroad or extensive service projects. So many times clients tell me that they've traveled abroad, and they ask if that's enough. Now, the reality is that 99.9% of candidates who are applying would have traveled abroad in some capacity. So while those experiences have definitely given you a broader perspective, it's just not going to differentiate you from the pool. But what will is if you've had the opportunity to maybe go abroad and work with colleagues, but even if you haven't gone abroad, have you worked on any projects globally with colleagues? Have you learned about how they work in business? That's another way to think about it if you're not able to go abroad from a professional perspective. And then any sort of extensive service project is another way to think about getting that global experience. And it's also a nice way of demonstrating leadership. So academic performance. So you may think that there's not much you can do now with respect to your academic performance from the college perspective, but there actually is, and I will get into that. But what does academic performance mean? So it means different things to different schools. So at Harvard and Stanford, this really means your GPA. So they put a little bit more weight on what your GPA was. But at Wharton and other more quantitatively oriented schools like Booth, Columbia, and MIT, this really means a quant score of 49 or higher on the GMAT, which pretty much translates to an 80th percentile or more. So really try to study now to try to hit that threshold. But if you didn't do well in college, I would strongly urge you to consider taking additional online coursework for grades to show your ability to the admissions committee that you can handle the rigor of the curriculum. And it's a nice way of filling in any gaps in your transcript. And here you really want to focus a little bit more on quant courses. So things like statistics or calculus, so that schools know that you can handle that analytical rigor. So that's definitely something you can do now, especially because there is about 6 to 7 months before applications are due, if you have a weaker GPA. The next step is cultivating your recommenders. So you actually have a little bit more control over the recommender process. So the first thing to really think about is to develop strong relationships with people who you think could write you a strong recommendation letter. And you want to do this long before you actually request it, so that the relationship is more authentic. If you go to somebody a month before the application is due and you've been out of touch with them, it's really tough to get that authenticity. But if you can build that relationship now, or even reach out to people or past managers at prior companies that you've worked with, that's a really great step you can take. Even if you may not necessarily go with them as a recommender, but even if they are a potential recommender, it's a really great thing to do. And the other thing to think about, and this is something we work on really closely at Stratus Prep with you as well, is making sure that the letters of recommendation fit into the overall application strategy. And there are actually many things that you can do to help your recommenders along the way. And those are some sort of tactics that we will work with you on at Stratus Prep. But the key is really just building that relationship now so that you're in a position to really walk them through the process. The next step to think about is school selection and really interacting with people at the schools that you're interested in. So right now, you can start to think about your short list of schools and develop strategies for how to interact with each school so that you can learn more about the schools you're targeting, and also so that you can let schools be aware that you're interested in them as well. So visit schools, or at least get to know students and alums at these top schools that you're targeting. Now is actually a really great time to start visiting schools. I know at HBS, many times the school wouldn't even allow visitors into the classroom during that first semester, mainly because students were still getting up to speed and getting to know one another. And so at HBS, this time period was really the best time to go. You can even pace it out because you have time. So really visit schools and reach out to students and alums at the school. You may have friends who have gone there. That's another really great resource. If you're not able to actually visit a school, see if any admissions officers will be coming to your city. Many times they do to hold info sessions. And if not, many schools hold webinars. So there's really no excuse these days for not being able to have any kind of interaction with these schools. And it's a really great thing to weave in an interview, for instance, in an essay if you've had a really impactful conversation with a student. So visiting target schools now, February, March, April, is really the best time to do that. And then finally, as we sort of think about what you can do now, you really need to think about a clear reason that you need to get an MBA this year. So what are your future career goals, and how does an MBA really fit in within that? Now, you want to make sure that you talk about more than just the technical skills. I think there's a tendency for a lot of candidates to talk about getting those technical skills that will help them in their future career path. But there's much more than just the technical skills. There are a lot of intangibles that you'll get from business school. For instance, you'll be able to expand your global perspective. You'll be able to build relationships with diverse peers. So thinking about some of those intangibles and why a top school is really essential for what you need to accomplish. And a lot of this is really delving down and doing your homework with respect to what are the exact classes and the clubs that you can get involved with. What programs in particular are those schools strong in, and how does it fit in within your own plan and your own post-MBA goals? So really think deeply about why you want to go to business school. I think what ends up happening is a lot of people end up thinking a little bit more generically about why they want to go to business school, and you really want to get into the specifics. And then start thinking about a team of experts. The reality is that about 57% of students who apply to graduate school do so with a consultant. And this is actually the number of students who've filled out the form or the survey. And so that number is probably a lot higher. So the people who you'll be competing against will be seeking out a team of experts. And you want to make sure that you can position yourself in the best possible light when you apply to business school. And that's what we here at Stratus Prep love to do, and why we're here for you. So I wanted to take the time now to go through a few case studies, just to tell you how it's the whole application process is really about the story and putting the pieces together and weaving that thread. So this is a case study with Jen. She went to a top 10 undergrad, a GPA of 3.0. So, not the greatest GPA, but she was, an engineering management master's, had a GMAT of 690, 44 on the quant, so again, a little more on the lower side. But she had 4 years of experience in brand management and healthcare. And so she developed a story around launching new consumer healthcare products in the emerging market, which is something she had pursued as an undergrad. And so what's really nice about Jen's story is that she had a thread that really tied everything together, and it just made a lot of sense from the admissions committee perspective. And so that story, because it was so authentic, really helped to overcome her weaker GPA and her GMAT score. So that's what you want to think about. Other than just checking the box with a GPA and a GMAT, what is your story? And how can you tie the threads in your story to make a very compelling case with respect to what you've done in the past and what you want to do in the future? So Jen was admitted to HBS in Wharton, and of course, she was thrilled and we were absolutely thrilled. So here's another case study with Tim. So he had gone to an Ivy undergrad, did really well, 3.6 GPA in economics, had a good GMAT score of 710, but he was sort of your typical male, where he had work experience in investment banking, and he also had experience in technology and business development. So Tim was a career switcher, and so what he focused on to really distinguish himself from other investment bankers was focusing on his story, on developing his family business, and really connecting what he had learned from the family business with the values and the skills that he had gained in college and from his professional work experience. And he was admitted to Stanford and Wharton. So again, you want to be able to think about how you can differentiate yourself from that bucket of people that you are going to be competing against. And as I mentioned before, with that Indian woman who was admitted to Stanford, even though she had a GPA of about a 3.0 equivalent, she had gone to an okay school in India. Her GMAT score was in the low 700 range. She had a strong story again that helped her overcome those lower steps. So that's what you really need to be thinking about now. And now that you have this time, it's a really great time to start. So at Stratus Prep, we are very excited to work with clients to help show them the way. One way we do that is through profile development. So through our profile development package, we'll work with you. You'll be assigned a senior strategist, and you have about 5 hours. It's a 5-hour package. And your senior strategist will work with you to assess your background and your goals, and your strengths and your weaknesses. Once that's done, and they've taken a look at your profile, then they'll actually discuss action steps to improve your candidacy. So what can you be doing now to get yourself to where you need to be when you apply in round 1? They'll also help you with your potential school selection list. And then they'll work with you to reassess and make sure that you're on track. And pretty much this process, it's an iterative process that repeats over and over again to make sure that once you've done this repeatedly, then your personal, academic, and professional aspects of your profile are as strong as it can be, and that the strongest you is ready to apply to business school. In terms of our more comprehensive packages, our application roadmap, as you can see, is very extensive. So once you've decided to apply, and of course, listening to this webinar today is definitely a first step, then you want to think about taking the GMAT and really just getting that out of the way. And after that, our process really focuses on strategy. So we spend quite a bit of time really trying to delve more deeply into a client's accomplishments, challenges that they've overcome, their achievements, the impact that they've had. And this is really done through the introspection, through the profile and evaluating the profile, through the resume, through the school selection, and then eventually developing a client's personal story. So that strategy piece is really, really important, and an important part of our step. And it's typically, I would say, the most difficult aspect for our clients, but the most important. And once that roadmap is in place, they make it much, much easier. After that strategy part is done, then we move on to essay outlining. And essay outlining is actually really important for our process because we want to make sure that all the pieces are there with respect to the content and the structure before you actually start writing. So we don't want you to keep on turning your wheels over and over again. We want to make sure everything is in place before you start writing. And once that outline is there, the writing is actually very easy for our clients. or I should say easier. Writing is never an easy task, but it's easier once you sort of have those steps in place for the outline. And we go through the essay writing and go through multiple drafts to make sure that we are really preserving your authentic voice and that we are conveying your accomplishments in a very clear and concise way. And then you're ready to submit. So that's really the application part. But post-submission, we spent a lot of time focusing on interview prep, on interviewing, and then helping you think about financial aid and scholarship negotiation strategies if necessary. So you can see it's a very, very comprehensive process. I've gone through it myself, so I know how stressful it is. But I can certainly tell you that having someone with you through every step of the way will just make it that much easier, and will make sure that you are really putting your best foot forward. So why Stratus Prep? So one of the key reasons is our team-based approach. So I went through sort of our application roadmap with you, but throughout every step of the way, you're assigned a primary counselor, but you're also assigned a senior strategist to input at different steps of the process. There's also a secondary reader who will take a look at your essays as well and provide objective feedback. And we have a proofreader who also provides feedback on your essays and makes sure that there are no typos, that grammar looks good. And you're also assigned an account manager to make sure that the process is as smooth as it can be. And the reason we do that is because you really don't know who in the admissions committee is really going to be looking at your application. And we want to make sure that we provide you with holistic feedback and that we're really maximizing, making sure that your application appeals to people with different backgrounds. So that's really the first reason as to why Stratus Prep. The second, which is really unique, is that we have something called the 4+ school guarantee. And essentially that means that if you purchase a package with us where we help you with 4 or more schools, and if for some reason you don't get into those schools that you apply to with us, then we'll work with you in a subsequent year on the same number of schools at no additional cost. And really that is how committed we are to your success. We want to work with you through every step of the way and make sure that we can help you attain your dreams, because that's really, really important to us. And then finally, our track record of success. So as I put up, my first slide, we've helped clients get into all the top schools, HBS, Stanford, Wharton, Columbia, Booth, and we are here to help you achieve your dreams as well. So if you partner with us on your test prep and applications, you will be maximizing your chances of admission to your top school. And finally, we have a really special and exclusive partnership offer for you today for taking the time out to listen. So schedule your free consultation. Through our consultation, we will evaluate your profile and discuss your application strategy and next steps. And the first 50 people to sign up for a consultation will be eligible for 15% saving through Tuesday, March 1st. So I'll leave this up here so you can see our URL, and you can also give us a call, but it's really never too early to start in this process. The earlier you can start, the better you will be. There are always areas in your application that can be improved, and we want to make sure that you can put your best foot forward. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Okay. All right, so we had a question here about choosing references. So with respect to choosing references, you really want to choose at least one direct supervisor, and most schools will require that. And ideally, another professional recommendation. If for some reason you can't get a direct supervisor to write your recommendation letter because you think it could hurt your opportunities at your current place of employment, then you can explain that in the additional info section, and that actually happens quite a bit. But then you would want to get a prior supervisor who may have worked with you in another role or another company. So choose someone who knows you really, really well. Title doesn't matter. If you've worked with someone who is a little more junior, let's just say an associate or a VP, but who knows your work really well, that's much better than getting a managing director. So the key here is to really work with someone who can support what you've done and who can really back everything up with clear examples. So that's really the focus. Okay. So there's a question here on how can I differentiate between business schools that focus more on finance, leadership, strategy, etc. So that's where visiting schools and talking to people will really help a lot. The key is really to dig in deeply with respect to what areas within finance and leadership strategy that you want to focus on. You know, finance by itself, strategy by itself is very broad. The more specific you can be, the better. And the more that you'll be able to find the specific classes and the specific programs at the business schools that really correlate to what you want to do. So the first step in that is really, again, introspecting and seeing what you want to do from a more specific and a deeper level, and then seeing what the business schools offer and talking to people. Okay. See what else is here. So here's another question. One of my mentors in my professional life is an HBS alum. Does an alumni recommendation help in any way or give an edge? So the interesting thing is, during my time actually, it was actually a tactic where people did submit letters of support essentially. So these would be unsolicited letters of support on top of the official recommendation letters. Interestingly enough, HBS has actually told candidates not to send in letters of support. So they are actually discouraging it. If your mentor still wants to send it in, then there are a couple things to keep in mind. One is that it should come across as unsolicited. So in other words, they should not mention that you asked them to write that letter. And the second thing is it should really come from someone who knows you really, really well and can comment on why and they think you'd be a really good fit for the school. So don't just get it from someone who has been an alum who doesn't know you that well, but you really want to get it from someone who knows your work and your qualities very deeply. All right, so we have a question here on what is the difference between working with a senior strategist and just working with regular people. So our senior strategists have more experience in the space and have gone to all the top schools. So 4 out of our 6 senior strategists have gone to HBS. One actually worked in the admissions office at Fuqua. Another one went to Columbia. So they just have a little bit more experience in the space. But our regular primary counselors are also extremely accomplished, have gone to all the top schools, and have at least 2 years of experience. So you are in great hands with whoever you work with. So another question here on what sets you aside from what everyone else is doing, or everyone else in the industry. As I mentioned before, I think one is that really strong team-based approach. By getting that senior strategist to provide that extra set of eyes and that experience that they can draw upon, they're really in a position to make sure that we're maximizing your story and hitting upon everything and not missing anything at all. If you work with a senior strategist, then you'll have a second senior strategist provide that feedback. And then, you know, the 4+ school guarantee. So that's really unique, and really it's not anything that anyone else is offering, and it really shows our confidence in working with you to achieve your goals and to make sure that you are successful. So a question here about an Indian woman candidate: is my GMAT bar high compared with others? Really great question. So in general, let me first talk about female and males, and then I'll talk about the Indian pool. With the female and male pool, the bar is higher for males than it would be for females. So men do typically have a higher median GMAT score than women, and schools know that. For the Indian population, the bar is definitely higher. For men, especially, you want to score, I would say, a 740 plus and really hit that 80th percentile quant score. And women, you want to be close to that. You may be okay with a 710, 720, but your average would be a little higher than the average female pool. All right. So do you have any other good extracurricular examples for someone who doesn't have a unique personal situation? Absolutely. Anything that you are really, really passionate about are good areas to get involved with. I've had people, you know, join the boards of nonprofit organizations just for organizations that they're very, very passionate about. So if you can even tie it back to maybe something you did when you were younger or something you were involved with in college, that's still another really nice way of connecting the dots. So continuity, I would think along those lines. The other thing you can really do too, which works quite well, is, you know, try to find initiatives within your workplace and try to create opportunities at work on the extracurricular side. For instance, if there isn't a volunteer program in your company, create one. That's another way of demonstrating leadership, both, you know, in the workplace and also with your community. So kind of another related question to community service. Someone's asking, isn't it a little late to start with community service and other leadership activities now? And won't it come off as crafting your profile to fit the school? So the answer to that is it's better to do something than nothing, which is why if you can still find an activity that connects with something you've done in the past, it will come across as a little less that you're doing it for business school. So if you can connect it, that's really the best way to go. Then it shows that you are passionate about one thing and you're just picking up where you left off. Does not visiting a school hurt your application? No, not necessarily, but you want to make sure that you still listen to webinars. Schools do make a note of who's attended these webinars or who's signed in, so it's always good to show that interest. So you don't have to visit a school, but you should still take the initiative to learn about a school, either through a webinar or talking to students. And many students are very, very open to talking to prospective students. So you just need to take the initiative to do that. So how do top schools look upon an applicant with a high GPA and high GMAT, but who attended a large public university that is not highly ranked? So that's fine. So this client who I mentioned, who had worked with the organization that he was passionate about because his girlfriend had the disease, actually went to a state school. And it was a very similar situation. He had a high GPA, a high GMAT, but it was a state school. So really, that's absolutely fine. It really comes down to what you've done. You know, what did you do in college that demonstrated leadership? What did you do post-college? What does your work experience look like? What have your extracurriculars look like? And how have you demonstrated leadership and how have you had impact? when should you start preparing if you haven't taken the GMAT? Now. You definitely want to start preparing now. Ideally, if you haven't even started, our tutors can help you with that. But I would target taking the GMAT in the spring, early summer, so kind of that May, June timeframe. Take it, get it out of the way, so that you really have the entire summer to focus on the application. So start preparing now. Okay. Should I have all professional recommendation letters, or should one be academic? Really great question. So for business school, you really want to have professional recommendation letters. Academic recommendation letters are not really looked upon as favorably for business school because schools want to see how you interact in a professional setting. So definitely try to get both your recommendation letters to be from a supervisor, either from a current company or from a current company and a prior one. Here's another really great question. Can I just reuse my essay for different applications? And the answer is no. Schools can tell if you are pretty much transferring one school to another. So you definitely do not want to be repeating the same information. Now, you may be able to transfer a couple of sentences or a paragraph here or there, but you want to dig down deeply with respect to why that particular school is important to you. So definitely do not lift and use the same essay across different schools. I also just wanted to give a quick reminder that our spots for the consultations are filling up, so definitely sign up so that you can get a spot and we can dig in deeper with respect to your profile and give a little bit more customized feedback. So here's a question. What if I bought a 4+ school package and didn't get into the top 10 schools? So the way our packages work is we will work with you to determine what those 4 schools are. So you will be happy with those 4 schools and we'll be happy with it. If you don't get into one of those schools that you work on with us and you buy a 4+ school package, we will work with you at no additional cost in the subsequent year. And I want to stress that reapplying is never a bad thing. Schools look favorably upon it. I've worked with many applicants who have applied in subsequent years, reapplied, and who have been admitted. And in that case, it's really just demonstrating growth. So we would work with you if you didn't get into the schools you applied to with us to strengthen your profile and work again and help you achieve your dreams. So here's another question about recommenders. What aspects should a recommender mention about us in the letters? So you really want your recommenders to focus on your strengths and key qualities. One quality that I mentioned before that every business school really likes to hear about is leadership. So I always think it's nice for recommenders to touch upon that. So you really want to focus on your strengths. You want your recommenders to focus on your strengths and make sure that there are concrete examples that they can use to back up those strengths. Don't focus on quality if they can't back it up, because that's not going to go anywhere. So things like leadership, your ability to take initiative, those are a couple of things that they can focus on. And you also want to make sure that what they focus on ties in with the qualities that you're projecting in your application. So that's part of our process in working with you. Once you've crafted your strategy, we will work with you to make sure that those qualities are coming through in your entire application. So again, our spots are filling up, so definitely do sign up. Great, so we have another question that just came in. I know I want to go to HBS or Wharton. Do you have alums or people who know the program well on staff? Absolutely. So we have a few people from HBS who are on staff here at Stratus Prep. As I mentioned, I myself went to HBS. I'm a senior strategist. I had direct access to the admissions office when I was a student there. We have counselors who've gone to Wharton as well. So you will be in really, really great hands, whether you're targeting a top school or if you have a more specialized interest. So I would encourage you to go to our website. The bios of our counselors are all up on there, and you can see their backgrounds and just see how accomplished our counselors are. How important is it that you work with a consultant who is either an alum of one of the schools or who is an alum of one of the schools you are targeting? It's not really that important. I think it's more important that the person has had the experience. What's really great about our team effort here at Stratus Prep is that we are exactly that. We're a team. And so even if you're not working with someone who has gone to one of your target schools, they have access to someone who has. So it's a very team-based approach. We work very closely with one another, and we're always talking and sharing resources. So it's really important to talk or to really be assigned with a counselor who knows the process, and all of our counselors do. Okay. All right, so I think we are out of time here, but thank you so much again for your time, and please sign up for the spots. We would love to talk with you on an individual basis and really give you more customized advice. So thank you again for your time, and feel free to contact us if you have any questions.